hear from Colt Barber here in just a moment. We will have at least every day this week as the lead up to Baylor spring game, somebody who covers Baylor, Travis Reeder, on Wednesday to break down a couple of things and just what we have. And also there are media sessions, of course, practices this week as well. Colt Barber, one of the partners and founders of Sic'Em 365, but also does a lot of writing and a lot of opinion pieces as well. Colt, thanks for your time. Hope you had a wonderful Easter weekend. So your thoughts about where Baylor is and how Dave Aranda, with what he was given, and how he has built this roster with transfers along with recruiting, and where you think they might be.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to look at the day and age of the transfer portal and where this program is kind of evolving to. But he has literally, he kind of preceded with the way he was developing his roster, what the transfer portal was, right? You look at Dylan Doyle, Jake Burton 2 years ago, and those guys that he really kind of started implementing that for. And now he's continuing to do supplemental recruiting and saying, I'm not going to build my roster off of the transfer portal like we've seen some programs attempt to do in college football, college basketball, whatever. But he's going to find guys that truthfully fit his within his evaluation of recruiting. How do these guys fit in, not just from a talent standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, from a character standpoint. And so far, I mean, you can't say enough good things about the guys that he has on his roster. Now, I think every individual has a different personality, and every individual has different, kind of quirks with their personality and the things that they do, and you have to treat each person differently or each player. But the way that they've gone about finding the guys out of high school that they really like from a character talent standpoint, and supplementing with players that come in to make an immediate impact has been remarkable. And I think that he's so diligent. Dave Aranda is so diligent, and the people around him understand so well what he wants in building a culture that we saw it last year. That was a foundation of high school players and a lot of players from a previous staff, but we're heavily relying on guys that he brought in to help win the championship. And now you see it, you're starting to see it again. They haven't moved too quickly. Josh White, obviously a big one coming from LSU at linebacker to replace Terrell Bernard, or hopefully that's what he does. And he might take a couple more this offseason. And obviously Jackson Player being a big one of those pieces coming in at semester on the defensive line. And that was just a take more so to bolster a defensive line where Dave Aranda wants to be more like the SEC. You can never have too many guys like that. And it just, I really like his approach, and they're very diligent. They're not just going after anyone and everyone. They're being very careful who they're recruiting. And I think that just really culture he's developed in, a little over 2 years.
Is that why? I mean, it's because it's a lot like Scott Drew in the basketball program. They shop at the portal, but they don't have to put anything back in it. That's how football was this year. They didn't lose really. I mean, they lost a couple, but I mean, when you have 85 players, that's going to happen in the portal. They're not losing nearly as many as even good teams around them that are going in.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to what he has developed as far as a culture. Now, I think if you would have gone back to 2020 and maybe without an awkward year with COVID and stuff, you might have lost more players, but I think there was an understanding from guys like JT Woods or even Christian Morgan and Kalen Barnes and the guys that you're seeing, Tristan Edler, Abram Smith. I mean, those are guys that kind of said, okay, we're gonna stick it out. Let's do it again and come back and let's do it again and see how it works. So I think it speaks to that culture that has been developed at Baylor and under Dave Aranda. And he's not, I mean, you guys know this, but for anyone that doesn't pay close attention to Dave Aranda and his previous stops are at Baylor, he's not going to MF anybody. He's not going to really get worked up. But if you're not meeting expectations and ultimately exceeding them, you're going to know it. And he's going to make changes, and he's going to make them swiftly and abruptly. And that goes for the coaching staff, and it goes for the team. And I think the players really that are there really respect that, know if they put in the work, they're going to be rewarded for that. And I think that's really helped with the case of the transfer portal. Now, they got to get through the spring. Obviously, spring is this week. And we'll see if any other guys hop into the portal once they realize, well, maybe I'm not in line for a starting job and my clock is ticking. But I think most of these guys would have already transferred if they didn't believe that they wanted to be at Baylor playing for Dave Aranda and his coaching staff.
Colt, there's a lot of guys that have left this team talent-wise. Jalen Petrie, Terrell Bernard, Kalen Barnes. I mean, could go on and name 5 other players that are going to be trying to get into the NFL here over the next month. And yet I see a lot of people who think that this could be a better team next year than it was this year. Are you one of those people?
Oh, man, you look at the guys that are returning, and if you talk about the SEC, if you want to talk about SEC football and where Dave Aranda comes from and building that offensive, defensive line, good running game, disciplined defense that can overwhelm you athletically at times, especially in the defensive line, this team can be better. But there's so much production to replace. Now, like it or not, you're probably going to be relying on, if you're looking at this team, you're going to be relying on some guys that Dave Aranda inherited to come in and to make plays and to step up. Across the board, specifically on defense, offense will be a little bit different. But he's going to have to rely on guys that have developed within the program. And that's going to really, kind of fall back on Matt Rule and what he was able to do. Now, obviously, the transfer portal has helped that, but the core of this team is going to look back and say, how did those classes turn out that Matt Rule recruited? Now, we're going to eventually get out of that phase. And I'm anxious to see it. I think there's a lot of athletic ability on this team, but they're not done going to the transfer portal. And so all of that's a roundabout way to say is I think you really and truly have to wait and see how does a guy like Josh Watt fit in on the defensive side of the ball. What do they do at receiver? There's a lot of talent at receiver. There's a lot of talent at running back, but none of those guys are proven. And I don't know that we really even have those answers, in a transparent way before we get into the summer, into the fall, because they're not going to come out and say, yeah, this guy, Craig Williams or Tay McWilliams at running back or whoever, Armani Winfield or Hal Presley, who's injured right now. How are those guys truthfully stepping up and progressing? And until you get on the football field in the fall, you're really not going to have those answers. So the coaching staff, I think, can answer some of those questions from a public perspective. If they do take some more transfers, maybe it's receiver position. I think this team can be better because the talent is there in key positions. Now, how does that talent turn into actual production? We'll have to wait and see.
Man, I was looking at Dane Brugler, who's going to join us tomorrow from theathletic.com, NFL Draft Scout, and then we'll have Matt Alkire. And I was looking at Dane Brugler and his thoughts about the Baylor players. You're talking about some dudes now. We knew that, but I mean, almost all of them are going to get drafted. Those the 5 or 6, 7 guys look like they're going to get drafted. That's a ton of experience, as you mentioned. One of the problems about the skill guys, now I'm not as much worried about running back. I know Abram was fantastic, and obviously Ebner was electric as well. But the wide receivers all seem to be bumps and bruises and dinged up. Some have a history of that. And that's, the best ability is availability. How much are you worried about that? Or is that just part of learning how to play with a little bit of bumps and bruises?
Yeah, that's something that we've heard about for the last, since 2017, is playing through injuries, or not necessarily injuries, but playing through pain, where you're not going to further an injury, but you got to play through it. And I think some of this stuff, when you look at Hal Presley, going in and breaking his foot, there's nothing that you can really do about that. You got to get him healthy. He's going to be a key piece this next fall, whenever he's ready to go. And you also need to be careful during the spring, but you also want to get these guys reps. There's nothing more important than experience, and the experience starts in practice and getting more reps with the one, getting comfortable with Gary Bohannon. And like you mentioned, availability is the key of predictability. And if none of those guys are available, it has to be next man up. If it's a walk-on or whoever, especially in this offense that you're looking at, that you're going to be relied to block on the perimeter. And that was where Baylor really took off at the end of the year, was when those receivers finally found their groove blocking on the perimeter. You look back at the Texas State game, you look at the Oklahoma State game early on in the season, and as those receivers got more and more experience blocking on the perimeter, that effort became key. And if the guys that are not healthy, that are not participating, it takes them longer to figure it out. You got to put the guys out there that are willing to block and make that extra play, and then they're rewarded, especially in this offense. So I think it just has to be next man up mentality. That there's a lot of talent in that receiver room. But if a guy can't stay on the field right now, I think there's enough talent that you say just next man up, and let's figure out who's ready to step up and make the plays for this offense in the passing game after doing it in the running game.
Colt, there was a big storyline going into spring ball after what happened last season. Gary Bohannon goes down injured. Blake Shapen comes in and, helps lead them to a Sugar Bowl and helps win a Big 12 title. And then Gary takes back over in the Sugar Bowl because Shapen's injured. And that all led to, the big topic of, all right, quarterback competition in the spring. And just I haven't been able to watch every practice, obviously, but just based on all that we've heard, I don't know how much of a competition there is, really. It seems like pretty clear that Gary Bohannon is the guy. Do you feel that way as well, that he's kind of established himself? And is that surprising to you at all that it does seem so clear?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that people might not see it because maybe it's not as pretty as what Blake Shapen can do. I mean, we saw that in the first half of the Big 12 championship game. I mean, when he's letting it rip, he can make plays with his arm. But I think what Gary gives him is just so much of a toughness and a dependability, specifically in the running game. And I think because we kind of get caught up in that, the quarterback is what drives college football, that you see Blake go out there and perform. Now, he's talented, man. If that's who it ended up being, I think Baylor fans would be very comfortable. But I think that Gary just brings that next kind of we heard about so much last year. People respect the heck out of him in the huddle, and they know that he's going to go out and make plays for them until he goes out and he gets injured. They knew that he was going to put everything on the line for them. And I think that still means something to this team. And I'm not saying that they can't win without a quarterback that doesn't have that pure leadership ability, but that means something to this team. You look at the offensive line. You talk about what Dave Aranda talked about, the offensive line needing to be the leaders of this team. And when they have confidence in a quarterback that's going to make the right decision to keep them from getting beat, that helps their mentality. That helps their confidence as well. And I think that means something to the entire team. And when you have a guy that works as hard as Gary, that also means something, that not that he's being rewarded because he works hard in the weight room, but because they know if it's even, he should be leading because of his work ethic and the amount of time he's gonna put in. And I love Blake. I love watching him play. I just think that Gary kind of has that it factor, even though we might not see it in what we believe a college football world is in quarterbacks. I mean, how long have we been talking about college quarterbacks and how good and how much of a driver they are for these teams? And I think he just does it in a different way, and it's just time to kind of have to get used to that with Gary compared to someone like Blake, who is a pure pocket passer.
Colt, is running back a position that maybe people could have been worried about at the game, but maybe they don't need to because of the offense? Look, we've seen the wide zone kind of be the offense that can interchange running backs pretty well. The guys none of them really played last year of anything of note, even Tay McWilliams, but they've had a year in it. Jordan Jenkins was recruited by this staff, so there should be reason to be optimistic, even though there's no experience back there.
Yeah, and I mean, you look to this time last year, he said, who's the running back? I mean, Treston Ebner had the best year of his career, and I think everyone expected maybe he can do it. Maybe he can be that guy. And he ended up not being the number one. It was Abram Smith. But I think there's so much of this unknown of, how do you have the ability to do it? How is it going to be within this offense? Was last year a fluke? Because what we saw in 2020 and what we saw in 2019, I mean, just the struggle on the offensive side of the ball. I think a lot of that goes down to scheme. The offensive line is expected to improve again and take another step forward. And so you see it in the NFL. It's just kind of like running backs they're becoming less valued. And I think in a way in the college game, they're just overlooked in ways that so many guys can go out there and do it. So there's not as a high priority on saying what are these running backs going to do for us this year? And so it creates nervousness at the same time. And I think there's more than enough talent in that room. I mean, you look up and down the roster of who recruited who. Jordan Jenkins, obviously, a guy recruited by this staff, but Tay McWilliams, how talented he was out of high school, who recruited him, Craig Williams. You just go up and down the list, and there's plenty of talent there. And I think that you just really have to hang your hat on the fact that this staff did it last year with Abram Smith. They identified Abram, put him on that side of the ball, and he had a heck of a year. Treston Ebner had the best year of his career after being, pretty much injured throughout, and then hit or miss majority for his production. I think you just have to trust this staff to say, we're going to put the best guys out there. And then if not, maybe they get to the spring and say, we don't have that guy. Who is that guy? And they go out and find someone in the transfer portal. I don't think that's going to be the case, But in this world, I think that you can find a running back to be contributing next fall and be very successful. I just don't think they're going to have to go out and find anyone outside of that locker room right now.
Colt, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Thanks for
guys.
jumping on. As always, Colt Barber, part of that machine that opened up Sic'Em365.com. Brian Etheridge and also Ashley Hodge, and all of them have their specialties of what they do. It's amazing, and it's been fun for us to be a part of it for the last couple of plus years. Kendrick Davis.